If you're considering SAP S/4HANA as one of your ERP solutions of choice, you may also be wondering, what other options do I have that are comparable to SAP? And that's exactly what I want to talk about today, is what are those top alternatives to SAP S/4HANA? My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And a large subset of our client base evaluates SAP S/4HANA as part of their digital transformation strategy for the 2020s and beyond. But at the same time, many of our clients often ask, what other options do we have beyond SAP? Oftentimes, these are larger organizations, multinationals, complex organizations, organizations that are trying to scale and standardize their operations. So oftentimes they feel like SAP may be their best bet or their only bet. So what I want to talk about today is what are those top options and alternatives that are comparable to S/4HANA that you may want to consider as part of your digital transformation strategy going forward. Now, one of the most common systems that organizations evaluate side by side with SAP S/4HANA is Oracle Fusion Cloud. And Oracle as a vendor is generally considered one of the top two along with SAP. Especially if you're a larger organization, a more complex organization, Oracle can be a great product, in particular the Oracle Fusion Cloud product. The Oracle Fusion Cloud product is generally a scalable solution that's very diverse. It's somewhat complex because it has such a large diversity, but it can handle a large breadth of capabilities and functionalities. So if you have complex operations, if you're diversified, if you have advanced planning or advanced predictive analytics needs, you have different sorts of requirements and needs that might strain a traditional ERP system or some of the other ERP systems in the marketplace, Oracle Fusion Cloud can be a great option. Now, when you're looking at Oracle Fusion Cloud and you're comparing it side by side with SAP, it can be difficult to know how they differ. What are the major strengths and weaknesses of those different products? Now, I'll give you a quick summary here of how the two products compare and where the major differences are. But for a deeper dive into this specific topic, Oracle versus SAP, I encourage you to check out a video that I posted on this exact topic that goes into more detail. But just to summarize some of the differences between the products, one is the flexibility. Oracle is generally viewed as more flexible than SAP. So if you're looking at SAP S/4HANA and you're getting the sense that it's a rigid product or you're not going to have as much flexibility as you'd like, Oracle Fusion Cloud can be a great product to consider. Now, the second big difference between the two products is the enterprise performance management or the business analytics of the solutions. Oracle Fusion Cloud generally has stronger reporting and business intelligence capabilities than SAP. And part of this is because they've acquired some very strong products in the marketplace, in particular Hyperion, which is now part of Oracle's Enterprise Performance Management Suite. And that's generally considered somewhat of a gold standard in terms of reporting, consolidation, financial reporting, business intelligence, predictive analytics, et cetera. So if you're looking for really strong quantitative capabilities of the product that you're not finding in SAP, then Oracle can be a great fit. Now, in terms of a lot of the other considerations, overall functionality, the ecosystem, the quality of system integrators and resources in the market, I'd say it's relatively even for the most part, although depending on what industry you're in, you might find that one product is stronger than the other. But in general, you might want to consider Oracle Fusion Cloud as an alternative to SAP S/4HANA. Now, another more flexible but just as scalable type of product that you might want to consider in addition to S/4HANA is Microsoft Dynamics 365. And D365 actually has two sub-products within that. You have your finance and operations, and then you have Business Central. Business Central is meant to be more of a SaaS-based solution that's meant to compete more with a NetSuite. So most organizations that are considering S/4HANA are going to be looking at the D365 F&O, or finance and operations component of the product offering. Now, the reason Microsoft is oftentimes a good option for SAP S/4HANA prospects is because it also has a breadth of capabilities that one would expect from a leading tier one type of system. So one of the key things that differentiates D365 from SAP is, just like Oracle, it's a more flexible product in general. You're going to find that the capabilities, the open architecture, the ability to integrate is a lot stronger in general with Microsoft D365 than with S/4HANA. You also have the fact that D365 is built on a generally open architecture, so finding developers and people that can integrate with the system is generally more plentiful than what you might find with S/4HANA, With S4HANA, you need a much more specialized skill set, which can be harder to find and oftentimes more expensive. And then finally, D365 can be easier to implement. We find that D365 implementation costs are generally lower than S4HANA, largely because it's a more flexible product, it's easier to use in many ways because it has that Microsoft look and feel that many people are used to from an office productivity perspective. And those are just a couple of reasons why the D365 implementations tend to be a bit lower cost in general than S4HANA. Now, the downside of D365 is if you're trying to standardize your operations or trying to really scale production or scale consistency across your organization, it's not going to provide that level of rigidity or standardization that S4HANA provides. But if you're looking for something more flexible, D365 can be a great fit, especially if you're a mid-sized organization and maybe you're not quite sure if you're ready for an S4HANA, D365 can be a great alternative. Now, for more information on how D365 compares to SAP S4HANA in terms of specific capabilities, you can also go to my YouTube channel and look for a video where I compare SAP versus D365. But in general, these are some of the major differences or considerations as you think about alternatives to S4HANA. Now, for organizations that are in industrial industries such as manufacturing and distribution, particularly if you're an auto parts manufacturer, medical device, or any other sort of industrial products manufacturer, there's a product out there called QAD, which actually competes directly with SAP in the manufacturing space. And a lot of people haven't heard of QAD, but it's been around for a long time. It's a product that is common in the manufacturing space, and it's also a good alternative to S4HANA, or at least one to compare to S4HANA for a number of reasons. First of all, the breadth of capability is very strong, but it's also very deep in the manufacturing space. So if you are a manufacturer and you're looking for good alternatives, QAD can be a great one for that reason, because you're getting the scalable type of product, a big, well-known, established vendor, but also getting the depth and the focus within the manufacturing space, which is very important nowadays because S4HANA is still developing its capabilities as it completes its migration from legacy on-premise systems to the cloud. QAD has been in the cloud for several years, and that's really another advantage that QAD has over S4HANA, is that it's been a cloud solution for several years longer than SAP, which is a pretty big deal because that means that that vendor has had more time to build those capabilities and the R&D dollars in the cloud, whereas SAP is still catching up in many ways. Now, the final advantage that I'll point out here that might be worthy of consideration with QAD is that it provides a lot more flexibility, but in a slightly different way than D365 and Oracle. With QAD, they have something called low code, so you can actually change the software without changing the software. So in other words, you're not necessarily required to change the code, but you can maximize the flexibility and make changes to the functionality and the workflows and the look and feel of the software without touching the source code. So that low-code approach to development is something that's very beneficial to organizations, especially if they're looking for maximum flexibility, but yet they still want strong capabilities within manufacturing, and they want that repeatable standardization type of business process to support it. Now, I've included a link below to a blog that I wrote recently that actually compares SAP to QAD. So you might want to check out that article to learn more about how these two products compare, but these are some of the high points I've highlighted here today. Now, I talked about Oracle Fusion Cloud earlier in this video, but the other Oracle product that's worth considering in some cases is going to be Oracle NetSuite. And it may sound a bit counterintuitive if you've been in the space for a long time and you know these two products because they are very different. But what I'll say is a lot of times smaller to mid-sized organizations, when they're looking for an ERP replacement, oftentimes they look at SAP S4HANA because of its brand recognition or their aspirations to scale to be a large organization, and they think that S4HANA might be able to help them, and that is generally S4HANA's strength. But there's sort of this gap in between where you are today and the point where you may be ready to fully embrace and fully adopt a system like S4HANA. And that's where NetSuite can be a good alternative. If you're in that small and mid-market, you might want to think about more of a stepping stone solution like a NetSuite that helps you slowly grow into that scale and slowly grow into the need for S4HANA potentially in the future. Now, like S4HANA, NetSuite is generally known for its relative standardization, common business processes and workflows. Along with that comes a certain lack of flexibility, but that might be a good thing if you're trying to standardize operations. So NetSuite is something I would consider if I were a smaller, mid-sized organization going through steep growth. And if I'm also looking for standardization to scale for growth, NetSuite can be a great option. And especially if I'm not producing anything that's overly complex. So in other words, if I'm not in the manufacturing space, or I'm not in a aerospace and defense situation, or any other sort of manufacturing environment where it requires engineer to order or make to order types of products, NetSuite could be a good solution. If you are producing relatively complex products and you're a manufacturer, then S4HANA might actually be a better fit because it has more capabilities in those areas. But for those other organizations out there, NetSuite can be a great option to consider. Now, another consideration for potential S4HANA customers is not one vendor in particular, but just industry-specific solutions. There's a whole host of niche players out there that provide very scalable and competitive and feasible sorts of solutions that can compete with S4HANA or provide similar capabilities. So for example, in the manufacturing space, I mentioned QAD, which is one of the vendors we've already talked about, but you also have in the manufacturing space, you have products like Epicor that specializes in manufacturing. You have Acumatica and DCOM and some of these tier 2 types of providers. If you're in the construction space and you have a need for field services and mobile workforce management, you might consider an industry niche solution like IFS, for example. So these are just 2 examples of industry verticals that have other solutions that focus on their space, provide deep capabilities within that one industry. And if you're a focused organization that is narrowly focused on one industry, and you don't have these diversified complex needs that a lot of other organizations have, you might want to consider some of these second and third tier ERP solutions that fall within that specific industry. Now, for more information on potential tier 2 providers, I encourage you to download our digital transformation report. It's an annual report that we put out each year that provides software reviews and rankings of different types of ERP solutions in different types of industries. So you could check that out for some ideas on some potential industry-specific solutions you might want to consider. But in general, this category can provide some good alternatives to S4HANA. Now, the final category to consider as you look at alternatives to S4HANA is this whole bucket of best-of-breed options. And this is similar to industry solutions, but a little bit different. Industry solutions are complete ERP solutions focused on one industry. Best-of-breed are functionally focused solutions. So for example, in the human capital space, you have Workday. In the sales force automation and CRM space, you have Salesforce. So those are just 2 examples of best-of-breed options that are meant to go really deep into one functional area and potentially provide better capabilities in one functional area than any full-blown ERP system could, including S4HANA. So another path to consider would be this best-of-breed option where you look at all your different functional areas that you're trying to automate or transform and find the solution that best fits that and look at how that set of solutions combined might compare to the functionality, the cost, the business value of an S4HANA. So these are just a few considerations and alternatives to look at as you're considering S4HANA. I've also included a link below to our digital transformation report that I mentioned before, which provides independent reviews and rankings of different solutions in the marketplace. I encourage you to check that out. I also encourage you to download our guide to an SAP S4HANA transformation. If you are leaning towards SAP, we provide a guide of best practices of how to best deploy and get the most business value at the lowest risk and cost with an SAP S4HANA transformation. So I've included links to both of those resources below, as well as other white papers and best practices that I think will be helpful as you continue your transformation journey. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.